to the Polgar Chess University. This week we'll talk about a very interesting topic, namely, what is combination in chess? According to the Wikipedia, in chess a combination is a sequence of moves, often initiated by a sacrifice, which leaves the opponent few options and result in tangible gain. Well, let's see some examples. What exactly is a combination? As we said, it usually, not always, involves a sacrifice, and most often it's a series of forcing moves. And it's very concrete and predictable, the outcome. Let's start here with our first example of this lesson. In the position that we see on the board right now, Black has just moved his queen to the middle of the board to d5. Now this is a serious move. Not only that it attacks the white queen on d4, it also, with the support of the bishop on c6, threatens to give an immediate checkmate on g2. What should white do about this? Well, an obvious solution to both problems would be to capture Black's queen and with that exchange trade queens. However, we can easily recognize that Black has a bishop and a knight, which white doesn't. Of course, white has a rook in return, but a bishop and knight combined is of more value than a rook, 3 plus 3 being 6 versus the rook's value 5. In addition, Black also has an extra pawn on e6. So therefore, following the basic principle, do not trade pieces when you're behind in material. It's not a great idea to do that. White, of course, could move his queen back, for example, to f2, out of harm's way and protecting the pawn on g2, which is probably the second best move next to the best move. Let's talk about an opportunity that white has here that's very special. There is a special combination that works very well in this position for white. White is able to give up his queen, to sacrifice his queen for a special purpose, not just to give it up for fun, but in order to force a checkmate. We only consider a sacrifice or giving up a piece a combination if it really works, or at least has an idea behind it. For example, moving the queen on e4 would be just a silly blunder which the Black queen would capture. On the other hand, the correct move, moving the queen to the corner to h8, is a beautiful and correct combination. It's true that even here the queen can and will be captured on h8, but there was a specific reason why white gave the queen up, namely to force the king to the corner, which will allow an immediate checkmate with the rook on f8. A beautiful example of what a combination is. Let's see a few more examples where one side or the other gives up a piece. The next few examples gives up a queen in order to achieve the ultimate goal, that is, to checkmate. Here we are on our second example in this lesson, and again the situation is quite a bit similar to the previous one, where the white queen is under direct attack by the Black queen. Also, white has to be extremely careful not to just move his queen away, because then Black would be ready to checkmate on g2 with the rook's help, the rook protecting the queen. However, here again, white has a very elegant combination at his disposal by sacrificing the queen for just a rook, which is obviously a much less valuable piece than the queen. What we can notice in all these combinations is that it's a very forceful move, doesn't leave black the opportunity to make any other move but capture the sacrifice. Therefore, it's considered a forceful move. And again, the point is that white has prepared an immediate follow-up by moving the rook up to f8, attacking the king, and because the bishop is protecting the rook, it is checkmate. Let's move on to another example where it's black's turn for a change. In this position, white seems to be clearly ahead, having an extra rook. Also, white has major threats, moving his queen to h7, attacking black's king, or even to h8, and to checkmate. However, time is a very important element in chess. Whose turn it is can make the difference between winning and losing. So in this position, if it were white to move, white would win immediately. But it is black's turn. And black can take wonderful advantage of it, again, by sacrificing the queen. Again, white has only one choice. There is only one legal move for white, and that is to capture black's queen. Again, this was an absolutely calculated risk that black took, because black foresees the immediate checkmate coming with rook captures bishop on a1. Of course, don't get misled that any time one sacrifices a queen, there is a checkmate right after it. These are special situations when the combination is possible. But definitely, it's always worth looking out for the opportunity. Here we are in the next position, and again it is black's turn. White has just moved the rook from c1 to d1, attacking the black knight on d2. It's important to notice that that knight is pinned, which means that if the knight would simply move away, then the black queen would be lost. So that certainly would not be a great idea. How about a move that looks quite attractive, moving the rook to a8, threatening checkmate on the following move with the queen? It's true that white now does not have the time to capture the knight, neither with the rook or the queen, because the same checkmate would end the game. The problem is, white could, for example, defend against that checkmate threat by advancing the pawn to a3, where the other pawn from b2 protects it. So what should black do? Again, black can not only save the game, but turn a seemingly difficult position around and force checkmate in just 2 moves, just like in the previous 3 positions. Here again, the queen is the sacrificial lamb, and by queen capturing the pawn on a2, black opens the a file. So when, after white's only move, the white king captures the queen, the black rook is ready to come to the now open a file, attacking the white king, and because the black knight is guarding both the b3 and b1 squares, the game is over. White got checkmated. Let's move on and see some examples when we do not sacrifice the queen, because it can be really any piece. It could be even a little pawn. In this position, again, materially speaking, black is clearly ahead, having a knight, while the two rooks more or less balance against the queen, or in fact, they are slightly more in the numeric value. Black's problem in this position is that the king is all the way in the corner with no way to move upward because of the two pawns on g7 and h7. This often results something called the back rank problem. When there are no other black pieces on the 8th rank to guard a white piece, rook or queen, appearing on the 8th rank attacking the king, there's often serious danger on the 8th rank. Now, if white would move the rook up to f8 at this very moment, that would not be a good idea because the black knight could simply capture that rook. So this would not be a combination, but would be just a very bad move, giving up a rook for no compensation. On the other hand, going back to the starting position, if white finds the correct move, the correct sacrifice, moving the rook to the 8th rank, again attacking the black king, pretty much forcing the knight to capture now this rook, big difference that now the rook from f1 is able to come down to f8 and checkmate the black king. What we can notice in these examples that even though black has a huge material advantage, it doesn't count because the checkmate is always a more important element than material gain. Let's move on to our next position, when black is up a little pawn. However, white has the opportunity to immediately capture that pawn on b5 and equalize the material balance. In fact, that move will create dual mate threats, both moving the rook from b5 to a5 as well as moving the other rook from d4 to a4. The only problem is that it's black's turn right now, and therefore black has the time to, for example, play b6 and create an escape route for the black king. So now if white attacks the king can simply move to b7 and escape. Let's go back again to the starting position and see if white has anything better to do. And again, white has a pretty combination. Remember, if either rook could get to the A file, that would be checkmate, unless black can capture the rook. And here again, the point is that it doesn't matter if white loses one rook, as long as the second one won't be lost, and the rook will be able to get to the A file and checkmate black's king. Another beautiful combination. So what you can see in all these positions, what's common in all this combination is that one side or the other gives up a piece. So far, queen or rook sacrifices. We'll see some others in the following positions, with a specific purpose to create a mating net, a mating pattern, and checkmate the opponent. Let's see two more examples on the same theme. In this position, there is complete material balance, each side having a queen, rook, and pawn in addition to the two kings. Such positions typically end in a draw, unless there is some special combination or tactical opportunity. In this position, what's important to notice is that if this rook of white's on g7 wasn't there, white could immediately give a checkmate by moving the queen to g7. In other words, if we were allowed to capture our own pieces and now move the queen to g7, that would be checkmate. Obviously, as we know, we are not allowed to capture our own pieces even if we think it would benefit us. So here the task of white is to get the rook out of the way and liberate that square for our queen. The problem is that, for example, if white would want to move the rook to b7, so in the following move the queen could go to g7, then black would simply capture the queen on g3 with a check, and of course all our dreams of checkmating are over. So let's go back to this position and think. How can we forcefully, not giving black the time, still accomplish our goal to clear the g7 square for our queen? And again here the correct solution is moving the rook to h7, capturing black's pawn. That's a check, forcing black to capture our rook, and now we are ready to checkmate. And one more example on this theme, a very similar looking one. But in chess, small differences can be major. Here, remembering the solution in the previous position, if we would try to again move the rook to h7, capturing a bishop this time, not a pawn, would be a major mistake because here black has an additional option. Besides capturing the rook with the king, black can also capture the rook with the queen. And then, after queen to g7, the black queen would capture our queen, and there is no checkmate on the horizon. Let's get back to this starting position and see how can white still accomplish the same goal, but in a way that it works. Well, here the correct combination is moving the rook out of the way, but not to h7, but to g8. Again, the logic is the same, the idea is the same, the execution is different. Again, black has only one legal move, only one choice, and that is to capture the rook with the bishop. And again, white achieved the goal to checkmate with the queen on g7. And now let's talk about other situations when we are using a sacrifice not for the purpose to checkmate, but to accomplish a material gain or the promotion of one of our pawns. In the position we see in front of us, black has a slight material advantage by having a bishop and a knight versus our rook. We can also notice that the black bishop from b5 that has only a value of 3 points is attacking our rook on f1. Here white has a special combination to create a passed pawn. A passed pawn would be that has nothing in its way and is free to advance towards a promotion square and try to get promoted. Here, the correct sacrifice, the correct combination is to give up the rook for a knight. Now, in this situation, it's true, black is not quite forced to capture the rook, but if they don't, then all what happened is we won a knight for nothing. Then it was a free knight. On the other hand, of course, the test of each sacrifice is what if they accept it? And in this case, after pawn takes rook on f6, the result would be that the pawn from g6 is free to advance, and it is not hard to get convinced that the pawn's promotion to g8 is unavoidable. It's important to notice also that if black would not have that pawn on d5, the one highlighted with the green, in that case the black bishop could move to c4 and guard the promotion square. However, because the pawn is on d5, it is in the way of the bishop, and therefore white's pawn will be promoted on the following move, and white will have a decisive material advantage. The next example is a very similar one, the same theme. Here we have material balance, but again white has a far advanced pawn. However, at the moment it's not a passed pawn because there is a enemy pawn in front of it, and therefore the pawn on h6 at the moment cannot advance. And that's when the combination comes into play, that white beautifully sacrifices the bishop for a pawn, capturing a pawn and attacking a second pawn on h7. And of course, the whole idea is that if now the pawn accepts the sacrifice and captures the bishop, then the white pawn again advances, and no black piece can prevent the white h-pawn from getting promoted to a queen on the following move. There are numerous other ways, tactics, that white can, or one side or the other, can use to achieve a gain. Let's see some of those. The fork is a very typical one. In this position, black seems to be just fine having a queen, even though white has an extra rook, knight, and pawn, which materially speaking pretty much equals a queen. But here white can achieve a winning position real quick, again by using a pretty combination. And here the beautiful combination is moving the rook to f7, checking black's king. Of course, before we go any further, the question always is what happens if the opponent captures the sacrificed piece. Not hard to realize that then the white knight will move to d6, creating a double attack on black's king and queen. This is called a fork, a knight fork, and that means that the black king must move out of the check, and the white knight can capture the black queen. A very common tactic that is being used in chess to give up a lower value piece in order to win a higher value piece. In this case, we sacrifice the rook, value of 5 points, versus a queen, that's 9 points. Let's see another example that introduces the theme of skewer. Of course, we're gonna see over the future lessons many more examples on all these different tactical themes, such as forks or skewers or pins, that at this moment I'm just trying to introduce its existence and to introduce what is a combination and why would we want to make combinations. In this position, again, we have material balance, and in the meantime, the white bishop is being attacked by the pawn on f6. Also, it's important to notice that if this bishop, let's say, simply moves away from the attack, then black would give a very unpleasant check with the queen, and when the king moves out of the check, black will capture our queen. We certainly wouldn't want that to happen. So going back here again, white has a beautiful combination at his disposal, giving up the bishop for just one little pawn. Again, the most natural and best response is for the king to capture this bishop. Of course, I should mention that if the black king does not capture the white bishop right now, but moves out of the check, then white would simply capture the black queen. So, after bishop takes pawn, king takes. Why did we give up our bishop for just one little pawn? Again, it's very important to foresee a couple of moves ahead why we're doing it. We're not doing it just for the sake of making a move. We purposefully did it so the queen now can move to h8 and create a skewer. A skewer is when you see three pieces on the same diagonal, or files in other cases. And the problem is that the front piece, the king in this case, needs to move out of the attack, out of the check, and then the piece behind, the queen, is lost. A beautiful way to win material. This is called skewer. And now let's see a couple of other examples. This is a pawn endgame where both sides have two pawns. It seems that black is in very good shape because the black king is very close to all the pawns. So for example, if now the white king would move closer as well, the black king could move to c7, and after king e4, king b6, simply attack the pawn on b5, and on the following move, capture it, reaching an easily winning position. However, again, white has a little combination at his disposal by giving up one little pawn and making sure the other little pawn gets promoted. Pawn captures, and the pawn advances to a7. Well, I hope you got the idea what combinations are about. In future lessons, we'll learn a whole lot more about it, but this is just an appetizer, a taster of what combinations are, how beautiful they are, and how at times we give up a certain piece for a bigger goal, better winning a more valuable piece or even checkmate. Thank you for listening. Until next week. Bye-bye.